when I received my mission call, it turns out that actually I was called to the same mission as my first cousin, John, who I basically grew up spending time with. We would actually fight a lot growing up, but we played together too. We were good friends. So that was kind of a surprise. I got my call and read it, and my dad was like, I think that's where your cousin John's going. And so we looked it up and found out that was indeed the case. And so I arrived in the mission field one transfer after he did, which was interesting. Or 2 transfers, actually. I got there 2 transfers after. But anyway, so that actually, I didn't think that I'd ever, be his companion, for example, or anything. Of course, that was very unlikely. But we did see each other throughout the mission, and then it turns out at one point we were companions. So being companions with my cousin John, first of all, it was interesting because our mission president was, he was a pretty, strict isn't quite the word I want to use, but I served under President Miller and President Traynor in the McAllen mission, and President Miller was just very, very by the book, like, kind of, I guess, cut and dried, straightforward, just, be very obedient and such. Of course, most mission presidents probably are focused on obedience, but he wasn't the sort of mission president that I would have seen putting cousins together. I felt like the fact that we were cousins would probably mean that we would never serve together. But I was serving in an area at one point, and it was a pretty eventful night, but I'll hold it to this phone call. So I get into my apartment, and we were actually on exchanges at the time, so I had another missionary, not my companion, with me. And I get a phone call from the mission president, and he says, Elder Missionary, I felt impressed that I should put you and your cousin, Elder Missionary, as companions. And he said, what do you think about that? Would you be okay with that? And of course, I'm like, sure, that sounds great. So, so I go to Laredo. He was serving in downtown Laredo, El Centro, which means downtown or the center, for those of you who don't speak Spanish. But I get there, and we spent just one transfer together on bikes, but it was great because I walk into the apartment where we were living, and one of the first things I notice is I go into the kitchen and I see a bowl of cinnamon sugar sitting there. And in my family, for Christmas and sometimes for special occasions, we'll have cinnamon toast for breakfast. And on my mission, I had thought about making that, but I didn't actually know how to mix cinnamon sugar, like what the proportions were. And so I hadn't had cinnamon toast in about 1.5 years at that point. And I walk in and there's this bowl of cinnamon sugar, and I look at it and I'm like, I'm making cinnamon toast. So the next day I made cinnamon toast. We would make like homemade donuts together, and there's a family recipe that that our extended family shares called Sloopies that it's kind of like tostadas or like burritos or something, but different. And we would make that like once a week. But because we were in South Texas and we had nice, like, fresh tortillas available, we would buy uncooked tortillas, and then we would cook them ourselves, and he would make pico de gallo, and it was great. So it was a lot of fun being with a cousin, and at the same time, we're actually very different. We were about as different as any of my companions and I got in terms of personality. I was more like uptight a little bit, and he was very, very laid back. And so that was actually really good for both of us, I think, because we were very different than each other, and that might have caused a lot of conflict potentially had we not known each other as well as we did. But I knew my cousin, and although we had different styles, like I loved him, and so I trusted him more than I probably had some of my past companions. And so I trusted his motives. If he did something that I didn't fully understand or I didn't think was the right way to do things, then rather than just thinking to myself, oh, that's, I don't like this, or I think this is wrong, I I would look a little deeper, basically, and say, well, I'm sure that he's trying to do the best that he can, and that actually was really good for me. And I think likewise, I think it was good for him similarly to have a combination of someone who he already knew and cared about, but who had a very different approach to missionary work in some ways than he did. So it was really neat, though. It was one of the most productive transfers in my mission, and we were in downtown, and if you ever get a chance to be in a downtown area on bikes, contacting is ridiculously easy because there are like millions of people outside, and all you have to do is ride your bike by them, and you can contact like 5 in a row. And so the typical, I found that I was in 2 downtown areas of my mission, but the typical goals, like mission-wide goals that we had regarding contacting, in our mission, it was 20 contacts a day, 20 lessons a week, 2 baptisms a month was kind of the standard of excellence. But it was really easy to meet that as far as contacts goes in downtown. And with my cousin, for some reason, like the way we worked, we were able to, we contacted a whole ton of people. It was kind of ridiculous, but I felt like we were more effective at teaching as well because we were different. Because he would, in many ways, he would identify a lot better with investigators because he was more laid back, and also with members, and people just got along very well with him, and I got along fine with investigators, but again, I was a little more uptight, and I think people tend to relate a little better to the relaxed sort of personality, and so that was really neat.